Today, we're going to explore the benefits of using the direct integration with Backgrounds Online in CERVIS. So we'll take a look at how to run background checks, then we'll discuss what this enables in your system and how to engage that data. And finally, we'll explore the process of integrating Backgrounds Online to your CERVIS account so that you can take advantage of these options. So in CERVIS, there are two ways to order background checks using the integration with Backgrounds Online. One would be on an individual basis, and then alternatively, you can order those in bulk. We'll take a look at that in a second. But when you're logged into your admin account, under the Volunteer Management heading, you'll see a section for viewing and managing background checks. In here, you can order new background checks by clicking the option to submit a new background check. When you select that, it'll bring you to a screen where you can ask or insert who you'd like to run a background check for. Of course, this person has to have an account in the system. So if you search for them by name in here and you don't see them, you can quickly make an account for them on the right-hand side. Add a volunteer profile, include first name, last name, primary phone, and email. Email is required in this particular instance, even though it's not normally required on the admin side, just because if you're sending them a background check, it's going to come in the format of an email. So you want to make sure you have that as well. But once you select a person through here, then you can select what type of background check to order, essentially what package level. We'll discuss this a little bit later. This kind of comes into play when you're setting up your account with Backgrounds Online. But once you've selected an option from here, click on Submit Background Check, and that will send an email to that person, essentially asking them to go through the process of filling out the remaining background check information, and then that will be delivered to Backgrounds Online. Now we'll talk about that email here in a second, but I wanted to look a little bit more at this screen that we're on currently. So again, when you submit a background check through here, or when you initialize a background check, you'll see the person that you just ordered the background check listed in this page. The default view for this page is current active background checks. So that would be background checks that are either in process, pending the applicant, or pending a review. So if we look here, the one that I just ordered is pending the applicant. So basically the volunteer needs to fill out some information to start that process. Once the volunteer has filled that out, it will be submitted to Backgrounds Online, and then it will be marked as in progress while Backgrounds Online is performing the background check. Once they've completed the background check, it'll be marked as either review or clear. So on this page, you can see all of the background checks that are still open. Essentially, they're in process. These statuses here are updated once per day. So the service will do that automatically once per day. If you want to manually check a status, let's say that you've been waiting on a background check that's in progress and you've been communicating with Backgrounds Online, you know they've been working on it, and you just want to check if it's been completed today, you can select a background check through here and then click to check the status. And that will just force the system to ask right now, what's the status of this background check? So again, all of these are updated once per day, but if you want to force the system to look at one and check if it's been updated, you can do that manually as well. Now, the pending applicant, again, means that the volunteer has received an email. So let's take a look at that email real quick. You can customize that in the system configuration. So if we back up and go into the system configuration, there's a section in here called Email Message Content. At the bottom of this section, or rather towards the bottom of this section, there's an option for your background check email message. So there is some information in here automatically, just kind of some default language, but of course you can update this as you'd like to. There are a couple variables in play in this email. So the volunteer's first name, and then if we look down a little bit here, also the background check link. You'll see those in the information box here as well. So if you want to employ those variables elsewhere, you can. Just a general note, anywhere that a variable is applicable in CERVIS, it will be listed in the information box next to that field. So if you want to edit this email, kind of change the instructions a little bit, give some more information, you're welcome to do that. You can also preview what this message looks like from here. So if you want to pull up an example of that email, you can do that through here. So again, this is what's sent to the volunteer when you submit a background check. when they click on the button to begin the background check, that will take them to a form with Backgrounds Online that's collecting all that information for the check itself. All right, so again, once a volunteer has filled out the background check, then it'll be marked as in progress. Once it's been marked as completed, or once they've completed it on their end, then it'll come back to you as either review or clear. The status here is not indicating whether or not you should mark someone as passed or failed. That step is up to you. Review just means that there's information in the background check for you to review and consider as you are then marking individuals as either passed or failed. So from here, you can select to download a report. That will basically download a PDF copy of that report. So you'll get the information from Backgrounds Online, from the report itself. So the volunteer's information in here. If anything came up in the background check, that data will be listed in here. Right, so you'll have this report to review. And then, of course, once you've reviewed that, then you can make your decision about finalizing as passed or failed. So if you finalize a background check as passed, of course, that'll mark that on the volunteer's profile that they've passed their background check. It'll add today's date as the date that the background check was completed. And of course, both of those things are searchable. We're going to talk about what you can do with background checks and how you can engage that data in a little bit here. Obviously, this screen is where you would mark that completion, or of course, marking someone as failed as well. Similar kind of concept. If you mark a background check as failed, it's going to mark the status as failed and then add today's date as the date completed. And of course, both of those things are searchable. So a couple other things to note on this page. Again, the default view is to show active background checks, but you can also search for background checks specifically that need your attention, so that are awaiting review. There's a quick search for that. You can also quickly search for finalized background checks. Or you can search for an individual by name in here. You can search for a volunteer by name. You can search by the order ID number from Backgrounds Online if you need to. You can also search by the volunteer's background or volunteer's email address. And of course, if you leave this blank, just like every other search box in Service, and click Search Background Check, that'll show you all of the background checks in the system that you've run through here, whether they're completed or pending or in progress or anything like that. A couple more notes kind of on this page. I mentioned that Service checks the status once per day. These background checks will stay in here essentially permanently. Again, the default view is to show active background checks, so it's not like you're going to see any of the past background checks. If you don't want to view like older information, the default view is what's currently applicable, what you're currently engaging with. But these will stay in here kind of permanently. If you need to cancel a background check, you can do that. So if you order one by mistake or ordered the wrong version, or you just want to cancel it, maybe that person has told you they don't want to fill it out, you can always come in here and cancel a background check. The way that billing works with Backgrounds Online, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, you're basically either billing the volunteer when they fill it out, or you as an organization are paying for background checks once per month based on how many were completed. So if you cancel orders, those obviously won't get billed because they're not background checks that were actually carried out. The link that is sent in the email for the volunteer to fill out the background check, and you can resend that email through here as well. That link is active for 30 days, so it'll expire automatically after 30 days if a volunteer hasn't filled it out. And of course, you can see the date that a background check was requested in here as well. So if you need to go through and search by that information or sort by that, you can. Okay, so again, this is basically where you're kind of engaging background checks or managing them in terms of ordering and running background checks. I did mention that you can order background checks in bulk as well. And that's done through the volunteer management section. So if we go into search and manage the volunteer database, you can search for a set of individuals and you can order a background check for up to 20 at a time. So if I select more than 20 here, in the drop-down menu for bulk actions, there's an option in here to submit background checks. If I have more than 20 selected, it won't let me do that. It'll say that I have to select 20 or fewer. But if I go and grab a couple here, select that option, then I can choose for those 6 individuals which background check I want to order. So again, this uses the same different types of background checks, which we'll talk about this more in a little bit. But it's the same pool that you would see for individual volunteers. You're just kind of ordering it in bulk for multiple people at one time. Okay, so once a background check has been ordered or completed and you want to check in on that information, there are a few different ways that you can do that. One is just by going directly to an individual's profile. So if we go into a volunteer's account, if I click to view or update their information, I'll be able to see background check information in here directly. So if we scroll down a little bit here, you can see the background check complete setting. So this one says yes, passed. We just marked this one today as passed. You can see the background check date, so when it was completed. This also tells you how many months ago that was. So you can kind of get a snapshot of that through here. If you need to manually edit this data as well, you can. So maybe I wanted to actually say this background check was completed 3 months ago, or I wanted to modify that information. You can do that. So if I go and edit this person's profile, we scroll down a little bit, again, we'll see that field. So I can change the status of the background check if I need to. I can also change the date if I need to. So you can view and edit that information on the admin side here and make changes to that. And again, you can also search by this data. So if we go into the advanced volunteer search, which we can get to from this menu, which again, we are basically just in searching and managing the volunteer database, or you can go straight into the advanced volunteer search from the main dashboard as well. In here, there's a section for volunteer background checks. So if we open this up, I can run a search for background checks by the status. You can also run a search by the date completed. So if I want to see background checks that were completed within a certain time frame, I could do that. Or we could search for background checks that do or do not have a date, or whose date is greater than a certain number of months old. So maybe you just want to go and bulk mark, all of the background checks that are over 5 years as expired. You could go and do that at once, maybe email those people and tell them they need to get new background checks, if you have a policy like that. So you can use this field to search for, sets of volunteers based on background checks in the system. And of course, just like any other advanced search in Service, this can be combined with really any other option. If you need to narrow your results further, maybe I don't just want to see everyone, I only want to see people who've passed within this certain time frame, or people who have registrations upcoming or no registrations, or some kind of combination therein. All right. Now, something you might be wondering is who has permission to view and manage background checks, which is a very relevant question. By default, of course, administrators can view and edit background checks in your system. They can manage that on volunteer accounts or really any other profile in the database. So administrators have that permission. Leadership team also can have that permission, and group leaders also can have that permission for members within their group. But there is an option to limit background check access for individuals in the system. So let's say, for example, you only want administrators to be able to run and order and view background checks. There's a setting for kind of who can manage background checks on each staff member's profile. So for leadership team and admin, if we go into update one of their profiles, towards the bottom, there's a setting that says background check access level. And for admin, this is full by default, so they can manage background checks entirely. For leadership team, this is limited by default, but there's another setting of none. Let me kind of go through these. Full, you can kind of assume basically just means that this person can engage any background check. They have access to background checks in your system. Again, that's admin setting by default. You can give that to leadership team, though, if you'd like to. Limited means that this person can submit new orders for background checks, and they can view existing orders. So they can view that on volunteer profiles as well, but they cannot view reports for the volunteers' background checks, so they can't actually view the full information. And they also cannot pass or fail volunteers. Obviously, they don't have access to the report, so they can't really make that decision. So again, leadership team is limited by default, so they can see it on volunteer accounts, they can submit new background checks, they can order them essentially, but otherwise they don't have permission to manage background checks. And then of course, none just means that they can't engage background checks at all. So if you'd like your only admin to be able to view and edit background check information, you can set this on any person who has leadership team access, and that would restrict what they have permission to see and engage. All right, now we talked about searching for background checks, but of course, one of the main purposes of background checks is to also limit access to your opportunities. So when you create an opportunity in Service, when you create an event or project, one of the things you can restrict by, so if you go to the restriction options, you can restrict by background check status. So the way restrictions work in Service, just as a kind of primary on this, you select who's permitted to register, not who's prevented from registering. So if you want volunteers who have passed a background check, that's exactly what you would select in here. And then only people who have passed a background check would be permitted to register for this event. So this is, of course, one of the main uses for running background checks, is to be able to set restrictions on your opportunities. And again, you can set this on events or projects. If it's a project, then you're essentially limiting who can apply for that project. Whereas if it's an event, of course, it's who can register. All right. Relatively straightforward. The next thing I wanted to get into is enabling the integration with Backgrounds Online. And we sent a link at the beginning here today that has kind of the landing page for Backgrounds Online. We'll send that again here in a minute. But where you enable this integration is in the system configuration. So if you jump over to the system configuration, at the bottom of that page, there's a section called Background Check Integrations. And in here, there's an option to click here to create or manage your Backgrounds Online account. When you do that, it will take you to this page. And again, we sent this page in the chat previously. But this basically is a landing page with Backgrounds Online. It has their pricing structure, and then it has some examples of different packages that can be run, but you can also set up custom packages with them. It's free to make an account with Backgrounds Online. It's also free to do the integration within Service. You are paying per background check. And I mentioned before, when you set up your account with Backgrounds Online, you can either set it up so that volunteers pay for the background check when they fill it out, or you as an organization pay for the background checks that are run once per month. So I mentioned previously as well, like if you're paying for background checks and you order a bunch of background checks by mistake, you do have the ability in that menu to cancel those orders. So before the volunteer fills it out, obviously if they fill it out and it's in progress, then you'd probably need to connect with Backgrounds Online, if they're already working on that background check. Okay, so I do want to just mention a couple things. They obviously have these different packages by default with Backgrounds Online. So you can kind of choose what you're ordering at that time. And then if you did need to expound on this or change exactly what you're looking for, if your needs are a little bit different, you can also connect with them about creating specialized or specific packages that are maybe more unique to your organization. Okay, but once you do create an account with Backgrounds Online, the only information that you need to integrate this into Service is pretty straightforward. You need your account ID, your username, and your password. If you need more information about where to find this data, we do have articles on this information. So if you click on the Need Help button when you're logged in, you can search for a term through here. You'll see articles that have to do with that, and you can find more information about things like enabling background checks and where you find those different settings in your Backgrounds Online account, and then where to plug that in again into Service. So pretty straightforward, but obviously if you have any questions on this process or how to set this up, or as you're engaging with your account in this, you can always click on the Contact Us button in here and submit a ticket to our customer support team, and they'll get back to you right away. All right, and that is pretty much it in terms of what you need to know to utilize and enable background checks in Service. So I want to thank you for joining again today. And I also wanted to note just one other thing. We talked specifically about the Backgrounds Online integration. If you have a separate vendor that you have chosen or are stuck with for running background checks, you can always, at a minimum, edit background checks in volunteer profiles or manage them directly. So if we go into create a volunteer's profile or update a volunteer's account, we kind of looked at this earlier. You can always go to the background check completion status and the background check date and just edit those things directly. So if you're getting the results from somewhere else, or you have a separate vendor that you're using, or your HR is running that and just giving you the results, you can always plug that information in here. One thing to note about this, these fields will only show up and the integration is only possible if you have that enabled in your system configuration. So in the system configuration, under information collection, there is a setting that says track volunteer background checks, and this must be set to yes if you want to be able to record that information and also do the integration. The integration obviously requires this, but even if you're using a separate vendor, you need this enabled. That way you can at least record the results on volunteer accounts. And then one last thing about this, volunteers can never see this information on their profile. It's something you can see, and we talked about the different permission levels in terms of whether you want to limit leadership team or give them full access, but volunteers can never see this information themselves. It's not data that they're privy to. All right, so we did have one question come through, and that was if you needed the premium level of service in order to run background checks, or premier service to run background checks, and that's not the case. If you have standard or basic, you can also run background checks using Backgrounds Online, using that integration. Obviously, just follow the steps to set that up as well. Okay, so really we've covered kind of ordering background checks through Service, running them, creating restrictions, running searches based on that kind of data, and then also how to set up that integration with Backgrounds Online and what they offer. If you do have any questions beyond what we've discussed today or within what we've discussed today as well, please feel free to reach out to our customer support team. I mentioned the Need Help button. You can search for different articles through here, but you can also just click on the Contact Us button and submit a ticket through there, or you can always email support@servicetech.com. And then I also wanted to remind you about the other resources we have available on our YouTube channel. If you go to video.servicetech.com, that'll take you there. All of our past recorded webinars are available here, as well as short form tutorials on a lot of different subjects. So thanks for your time again today, and I hope to see you in the next webinar.